Welcome back to our service. O'Keefe was born in Sun Prairie, Wisconsin, on November 15th, 1887, in a small farmhouse. Her family ran a cattle farm and had 7 kids. She was the second child. The history of her family was strange, even though their life seemed normal. Before coming to America in 1848, her grandpa, George Victor Toto, was a Hungarian count. But that touch of royalty couldn't keep them from having hard times. The family was having a hard time with money. Francis, her father, tried and failed at many business ventures. By the time Georgia was a teenager, life on the farm had turned into a hard fight to stay alive. That change made her feel very sad because they used to have a lot of money, but now they were poor. As a child, she learned not to rely on other people, and that lesson followed her throughout her life. Sun Prairie's big, quiet land became Georgia's world. The field was empty, big, and very quiet, but she felt like there was something magical about it. Some people might have felt stuck, but she paid close attention to the details that most people didn't. She could hear what the wind was saying through the grass, the shape of wildflowers, and the curve of dried bones. It wasn't just nature that she saw. She saw shapes, designs, and patterns that were hidden. Even though they lived in a rough area, her mother, Ida, was cold and classy. That quiet, proud air followed Georgia as she grew up. That mix of being alone and seeing beautiful things made her want to become an artist. When her dad's last business failed in 1902, the family had to leave Wisconsin. Moving to Williamsburg, Virginia, he tried making concrete blocks for building houses again, but it didn't work out. The loss of money was terrible, and people saw the once respected O'Keefe family fall apart. After getting tuberculosis, Georgia's mom spent most of her time in bed. Watching her family fall apart hurt Georgia, and she felt powerless and ashamed. This made her want to take charge of her own life. For love, money, or fame, she didn't want to depend on anyone. Georgia started painting with watercolors when she was 10 years old. She learned from a neighborhood artist named Sarah Mann. She took the lessons with her sisters Ida and Anita as well. Mann used art books that taught kids how to copy easy shapes and then work their way up to more difficult tasks. Even though Georgia did what she was told, she really didn't want to copy other people. Although she was young, she didn't want to paint like everyone else. She wanted to make something unique and new. A watercolor of small cherry blossoms from one of her earlier works already had the focused, close-up look that would make her famous. Georgia had already begun to cross the lines even though her teacher told her to stay in them. Georgia relocated to Chicago in 1905 and enrolled at the School of the Art Institute. She got cheap housing with her uncle and aunts. John Vanderpool, her teacher, was one of the few people she fully admired as a teacher. She put in a lot of effort and got to the top of her class. To improve her painting skills, she even learned anatomy by taking skulls apart. But something terrible happened the next year, in 1906. People in Georgia got typhoid fever. She was so sick that it took all of her strength and even made her hair fall out. She needed to skip school and go home. Before, she painted every day. However, something inside her changed while she was healing. When she thought about dying, she became more quiet and determined to make something that really counted. After a rough patch in 1907, she was ready to start over and moved to New York to attend the Art Students League. The teachers weren't the same. They helped people be creative. Using a brush, William Merritt Chase showed her how to make big lines. The picture of a rabbit and a copper pot that she won in 1908 was also very good. She was able to go to a summer school at Lake George for free because of it. She also started going to modern art spaces, such as Stieglitz's 291, to see new works that made her feel something. But disaster came back that same year. Her dad lost all of his money, and her mom's health got worse. Georgia didn't have a pick. As a result, she quit the art world and became a business artist in Chicago. Advertising for lace and fabric was her job. Although she was quick and good at it, it didn't fill her up. She was so angry about the work that she burned most of the pictures later. Her stomach turned up when she smelled turpentine. It's been almost 4 years since she painted anything. She had one of the worst times of her life during that silence. It happened again in 1910. She got measles this time, and it made her eyes hurt. As an artist, that fear was awful. For her family's sake, she moved to Charlottesville. While she was getting better, she started drawing with charcoal. They were different from what she had done before. They were vague. She didn't get them from a book or master. They came from her own thoughts and feelings. The real change in her work happened then, and it didn't stop there. In 1911, she went back to Chatham Episcopal Institute, the school where she had gone to school, but this time as a teacher. The rules weren't followed. Students were supposed to copy still things, but she had them draw real people instead. It shocked the parents. Teenage girls weren't supposed to do it, but Georgia didn't care. She believed in how people really felt, not in following old rules. Her teaching made a big deal. It also showed that she was ready to take charge instead of back off. Things began to change in 1915. She drew with charcoal while she was teaching at Columbia College in South Carolina. The drawings were based on new design ideas she had learned in the summer. These pieces were brave and didn't look like anything else on the market at the time. At the beginning of 1916, her friend Anita Politzer showed them to Alfred Stieglitz after receiving them from her. Astonished, he stated that he was unable to describe how they made him feel. At the age of 28, she became one of the first modernist artists in the United States. After the incident, her name would always be linked to his. She met Stieglitz when he was 52 years old and wedded. There was only 29 of her. They started writing letters, a lot of them. The things they said were full of lies and longing. Georgia went to New York from Texas in 1918, where she was a teacher. Stieglitz helped her make a living as an artist by paying her rent and opening a workshop for her. Although he was still married, no one expected the age difference or the affair. Georgia made 51 watercolor works in Texas between 1916 and 1918 that were all about Palo Duro Canyon. Many people thought the deep reds and strong shapes looked like women. Some people thought they were sexual. She caught the canyon's raw power in a way that no one else had before. It was 800 feet deep and went on for miles. It is unknown what happened to Special Number 21, which was stolen from a museum in 2003. Things went downhill in 1918. Georgia got the Spanish flu, which spread to millions of people around the world. She was hurting. She struggled. Her brother had been in the war and was killed by poison gas. An intense sadness overtook her. The flag is a painting she made that showed how sad she was. Dark clouds, a flag that is shaking, and no stars. The flag was meaningless to her, she said. Illness and pain made her decide to move to New York for good, but it wasn't easy to find peace even there. In 1918, Stieglitz began taking pictures of her. He shot over 300 pictures. As many of them as possible were naked. He showed them in a gallery in 1921. Individuals observed her bare body, including her hands and chest. Some people were shocked, while others thought it was art. But Georgia later said that the pictures made her feel exposed, like anyone could see more of her body than her works. It wasn't how she had hoped, but they did help her become famous. Not a fairy tale happened when Georgia O'Keeffe married Alfred Stieglitz on December 11, 1924. Both people knew they needed each other and agreed to keep it quiet. Even so, it was never easy. He was older and more well-known in the art world, while she was gaining popularity quickly. Their weird way of understanding worked at first. It all fell apart in 1928, though. Dorothy Norman, who was married and 23 years younger than Georgia, became Stieglitz's lover. The affair wasn't kept secret. It happened in public, terribly open. Georgia had to keep an eye on Dorothy because she worked closely with Stieglitz. Meanwhile, Georgia lost a very important project, a painting for Radio City Music Hall. Something inside her broke because of that loss and the ongoing shame. By 1933, she had a big mental breakdown and went to the hospital. 2 months went by while she was there. She was unable to paint at that time. But something amazing had happened before that. Her one-woman show in New York on January 29, 1923, shocked the art world. There were 100 of her works on display. 500 people came on the first day. No longer was she just another artist. People really liked her, but the reviews were weird. They didn't say anything about her clothes or style. Individuals talked about her being a woman. Everything turned into something sexual. There were even people who said her works were full of hidden meanings. By 1928, though, she had done something that no other American artist alive at the time had ever done. She made $25,000 by selling 6 drawings of calla lilies. Somewhat rich back then, that's equal to about $400,000. Some people thought that Stieglitz had set up the sale with unknown customers to make herself more valuable. No matter if it was true or not, the result was accurate. They had money, power, and freedom now. There was no one else she had to depend on. Around the same time, Critics began to say something else in whispers. They said that her drawings of skyscrapers were sexual. She painted the Radiator Building in Night, New York, in 1927. It stood tall, was smooth, and shone. From her 30th floor apartment window in the Shelton Hotel, she had painted it. People who didn't like the building said it looked like a sign of male power. Georgia told them it wasn't true, but the rumors kept spreading. Skyscrapers became so popular that even architects started to call them symbols of the American spirit. People were now talking about her work in a bigger way when they talked about modern life, gender, and desire. After that, things changed again in 1929. GA left New York that summer and went west. She was asked to go to Taos, New Mexico. She was totally different after the trip. The land was rough and went on forever. To see more of the desert, she bought a Ford Model A and learned how to drive it. In the sand, she started gathering animal bones. Her 1931 painting of a cow head with calico roses was very popular. It was beauty, not death, that the bones showed her. But doubters in the East didn't get it. Jay didn't care that people thought her new work was weird and scary. Her yearly trips to the desert never ended. After that, everything fell apart in 1932. The painting she made for Radio City broke. For real. The canvas came apart. The venture failed. Stieglitz lied to her again. The gallery spot she had was given to someone else. It was the last blow. It changed her body. She had a racing heart. She sobbed all the time. She was suffering from a lot of headaches. She started going to the hospital in 1933. What the doctors meant by psychoneurosis was that she was very sad and her body couldn't handle it any longer. Before, she painted every day. The worst thing in her life was that silence. There was something else going on at this time. Companies started to copy her style. Her well-known close-up flower pictures started showing up in ads. That wasn't okay with her. Thieving was brave. She fought back, even though she was still getting better. She went to court with them. There was no money involved, so she could keep her art safe. She triumphed. The word was very important, but the money was very small. According to the court, someone couldn't take her unique style. Other artists got strength from this case, and it made her even more eager to work alone. She found Ghost Ranch in 1934. It is a huge desert place in New Mexico. She loved it so much that she tried for years to buy a small clay house there. It was in 1940 that she finally did. It was just right for her that the house was simple and quiet. The desert was always visible because she added a big window. The Black Place was the name she gave to a strange area of Black Hills nearby. Out in the distance, it looked like stone waves, almost like elephants. From 1936 to 1949, she went to the Black Place many times, painting it with a lot of anger. She made 6 large paintings, a pastel, and 9 sketches in just 2 years, 1944 and 1945. She was at her most artistic at that time. In 1940, she had drawn more than 200 landscapes of New Mexico. But one mountain stood out as her favorite. Beyond that, it was flat and stood on its own. The mountain was called Cerro Pedernal. She named it her mountain. According to her, God told her that she could have it if she painted it enough. People in the area started calling it O'Keefe's Mountain over time. It was painted over and over, and she often put it behind bones or flowers. Yet she was hiding things. No one was supposed to copy her methods. She did her painting alone. No guests and no other things to do. She burned paintings that weren't good enough. She did not want anyone to ever see what she did wrong. The time she plagiarized in 1933 taught her to protect her work with all she had. It was scary for Georgia O'Keeffe in 1945. Letters she had sent to Alfred Stieglitz, the man she loved, for more than 30 years were virtually made public. These notes were not just sweet. They were honest, emotional, and very close to home. The way the world saw her could change just by reading some of the lines. She had written things like, "My body is simply crazy with wanting you." That kind of language, especially from a woman in her position, could have destroyed everything she had worked for. She had always been judged differently. Critics already turned her art into something sexual. Now, her words were about to be used against her too. She knew male artists didn't have to deal with this kind of scrutiny. Their private lives were left alone, but she didn't get that same protection. What made it worse was that Alfred had written things too. He had photographed her naked again and again. His letters showed how obsessed he had been, but no one threatened to publish his words, only hers. So she did something heartbreaking. She burned hundreds of letters. She wanted to keep some control over her life, even if it meant losing pieces of her story forever. It was the only way she felt she could protect herself. The very next year, in May 1946, something huge happened. Georgia became the first woman in history to have a solo show at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. 100 of her works were displayed. It should have been the best time of her life. But just 2 months after the show opened, tragedy hit. Alfred died suddenly of a stroke on July 13, 1946. She was devastated. She barely spoke to the press. She couldn't even bring herself to promote the exhibition. On top of that, 3 of her paintings were stolen from the show. They were never found. It was supposed to be a celebration of everything she had accomplished. Instead, it felt like her world had fallen apart. In 1950, Georgia left everything behind and moved permanently to Obiquio, New Mexico. She wanted peace, but even there, she pushed herself harder than ever. In 1965, she created a painting so big it stretched 24 feet wide. She called it Sky Above Clouds 4. She worked on it every day, starting at 6 in the morning and painting late into the evening. The garage she used wasn't even heated, and she was always scared that a rattlesnake might crawl under the canvas while she worked. But she didn't stop. That painting would later sell for record-breaking prices. People started calling her one of the most valuable living American artists. But with success came new problems. In the 1980s, fake Georgia O'Keeffe paintings started showing up in galleries. Some were sold for hundreds of thousands of dollars before experts realized they were forgeries. The problem became so serious that Georgia had to personally step in. She looked at the paintings herself and told people which ones were real. Some collectors got angry. They had spent a fortune on fakes. Lawsuits followed. Her name was dragged into courtrooms. Even though she had nothing to do with the forgeries, her legacy got tied up in all that mess. One of the strangest things happened in 1959. Georgia, now 72, was traveling through Europe, but she wasn't carrying fancy clothes or art supplies in her luggage. Instead, she packed bones, real bones, cow skulls, horse bones, even sheep skulls. She told everyone they were her essential art materials. When French customs officers scanned her suitcase at Charles de Gaulle Airport, they thought they had found human remains. They stopped her immediately. Georgia got angry. She yelled at them in broken French and held on to one of the skulls like it was a baby. Reporters snapped photos of her being escorted through the airport, still gripping her bones. People later said she would arrange those bones in her hotel rooms and talk to them as if they were alive. It shocked everyone. Then came 1977. Georgia. Real bones, cow skulls, horse bones, even sheep skulls. She told everyone they were her essential art materials. When French customs officers scanned her suitcase at Charles de Gaulle Airport, they thought they had found human remains. They stopped her immediately. Georgia got angry. She yelled at them in broken French and held on to one of the skulls like it was a baby. Reporters snapped photos of her being escorted through the airport, still gripping her bones. People later said she would arrange those bones in her hotel rooms and talk to them as if they were alive. It shocked everyone. Then came 1977. Georgia was 90 years old. President Gerald Ford gave her the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian honor in America. Everyone saw her as this strong, fearless woman who had lived life on her own terms. But during a private moment at the White House, she said something no one expected. She told a journalist she had one big regret. She had never become a mother. She said Alfred had made her choose. He didn't want kids. He told her they would ruin her art and their relationship. And so she chose art. But standing there, holding that medal, she said quietly, "I chose wrong." She revealed something even more painful. She had actually been pregnant 3 times in the 1920s and 30s. But each time she lost the baby, Alfred didn't comfort her. He told her the miscarriages were blessings. She said those words haunted her. Sometimes she dreamed about the children she never had. She admitted she had been secretly collecting toys her whole life and hiding them in her home. No one knew. Everyone had believed she didn't want children. But the truth was very different. When Alfred Stieglitz had a stroke in July 1946, Georgia O'Keeffe flew from New Mexico to New York right away. She stayed by his side until he died on July 13th at the age of 82. But what happened next shocked everyone. Georgia made the decision to cremate him, something his family never expected. It went against their traditions and caused deep tension. And just before he passed, Georgia asked Dorothy Norman, the woman who had been Stieglitz's mistress for years, to leave the hospital room. That moment was powerful. It ended a long and painful chapter that had haunted Georgia since the 1920s. Even though her marriage with Stieglitz had grown cold, she wasn't going to let anyone else control how it ended. After his death, she found herself buried in paperwork. From 1946 to 1949, she worked nonstop to handle Stieglitz's massive estate. It had over 4,000 pieces of art and thousands of letters. She donated many of them to big museums like the Met. But it wasn't easy. His family and others fought back, questioning her choices and accusing her of favoring certain works. The records were so detailed and overwhelming that she needed help just to organize them. During those years, she stayed in New York more than she wanted to. Her own painting had to wait while she protected Stieglitz's legacy. By 1949, the pressure finally caught up to her. She got very sick, though she never spoke much about it. People close to her said she was exhausted, physically and emotionally. But even while recovering, she never truly stopped painting. She worked on smaller pieces from her bedside, refusing to fully let go of her art. That same year, she decided to leave New York behind for good and made New Mexico her permanent home. It was a huge turning point. She was leaving the world that had made her famous and stepping into the desert that had always pulled at her spirit. That same year, she did something almost no one expected. She destroyed many of the intimate photos that Stieglitz had taken of her, especially the nude portraits. These pictures had once helped make her famous. They showed the deep passion between them and were praised for their beauty. But Georgia didn't want to be remembered just as someone's muse. She wanted control over her own image, so she carefully chose which ones to keep and which to burn. She gave some to museums and to Dorothy Norman, but the rest were gone forever. Some say those destroyed prints would be worth millions today. In 1968, when she was already in her 80s, she began losing her eyesight due to macular degeneration. By 1971, at age 84, she could barely see straight ahead. Most people expected her to stop painting, but Georgia refused. She kept working, using assistants to help her create huge paintings. She described what she saw in her mind, and they followed her instructions like an orchestra following a conductor. She also turned to clay, since she could feel it with her hands. Even without sight, she never lost her creative power. Her new works were different, but still bold and full of life. Then, in 1973, when she was 86, something happened that sent shockwaves through the art world. A 27-year-old potter named one Hamilton came to her door asking for pottery advice. But soon, he became much more than that. He became her assistant, her driver, her companion, and maybe even more. People whispered about their relationship, calling it scandalous. The age gap was 58 years. Some called it strange. Georgia called it funny. She said, "Men artists always have young women, but people are shocked if I have a young man." He took care of her, traveled with her to Morocco, and stayed by her side through her final years. When she passed in 1986, she left him nearly everything: her houses, her artworks, and most of her $70 million estate. In 1976, she released an autobiography that shocked readers. It was only about 1,000 words long, but full of impact. She started it by saying, "Where I was born and where and how I lived is unimportant." She focused on what she did with her life, not where she came from. She barely mentioned her marriage or her mental breakdown in 1932 when she had spent 2 years in psychiatric care. Still, the book became a bestseller. She designed every page herself and wanted it to be the only real story of her life. But many readers were left wanting more. In 1978, at age 90, she found herself in court. A banker had bought 28 watercolors, said to be hers for $5.5 million. But experts began questioning if they were real. Georgia, nearly blind, testified in court. Her mind was still sharp, and she stood her ground. The trial exposed how difficult it can be to prove who made what in the world of art. Later, in 1993, another fraud case came to light. A woman had been selling fake copies of Georgia's sculptures for thousands of dollars each. The copies had cost just a few hundred to make, but buyers had paid up to $5,500. In 1984, Georgia's health became so fragile that she had to leave her beloved Abiquiu home and move to Santa Fe. She had spent 38 years painting in northern New Mexico, but now she was 97 and couldn't handle the isolation anymore. Even though she was blind, she kept creating by describing her visions out loud. Assistants painted for her, following her every word. She created dreamy images of the desert from memory. One Hamilton took care of her, making sure her final months were full of peace and art. She passed away in Santa Fe on March 6, 1986, at the age of 98. After her death, something remarkable happened. Georgia had asked for her ashes to be scattered on Pedernal Mountain, the flat-topped mesa she had painted again and again. She once said, "God told me if I painted it enough, I could have it." That wish was fulfilled. As her ashes were scattered, the wind carried them across the desert dust, blending her with the mountain forever. But peace didn't last long. Her will became the center of a massive legal fight. Just days before she died, she had signed papers giving one Hamilton not just 10%, but 70% of her fortune. Her family was furious. Her sister and grandniece accused Hamilton of tricking her. They said he used her money to buy luxury cars and a $2.6 million house where his ex-wife and kids lived. The court battle got ugly. But in July 1987, they reached a deal. Hamilton walked away with $2 million some art and the Ghost Ranch property. The rest went to the new Georgia O'Keeffe Foundation.